What's happening, YouTube? It's your boy Maurice back with another video. And today we got Bryan Nichols. And if you ain't never heard of Bryan Nichols, man, you in for a treat, man. A lot of your favorite artists done songs about Bryan Nichols, including Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan.
Bryan Nichols with a push out of kid. Hey, to the left side of Bryan Nichols. Bryan Nichols with a push out of kid. I ain't looking for the swoop, I need a bitch who got him. Let's take the same Draco. David Koresh, Waco. Every time they make a nigga face crack, let's go H-Rap. Fuck 12 in the paper. Yeah, I feel like going Bryan Nichols. Yeah, I feel like going Bryan Nichols. Yeah, I feel like going Bryan Nichols. Shoot back at the police till they stop killing niggas.
Yeah, so without further ado, here's the Bryan Nichols story.
17 years ago today, fear gripped people living all across metro Atlanta for 26 hours as investigators searched for a man suspected of murdering 4 people.
Bryan Nichols, who was originally in court to be retried on a rape charge, overpowered a Fulton County deputy inside the courthouse, beat her and stole her gun, and that was the start of a deadly rampage.
Horrific, yeah, absolutely horrific. And that stolen gun was then used to kill Fulton County Superior Judge Roland Barnes and his court reporter as well. The violence didn't stop inside the courthouse. Shortly after leaving the courthouse, Nichols shot and killed another deputy. He spent all day on the run, and that evening he went to a home in Buckhead and shot a federal agent before stealing his gun and pickup truck. His next stop was in Duluth, and that is where he pushed his way into the apartment of a woman named Ashley Smith.
The most profound thing for me, and I think it was just something that has really convicted me about looking past everything and into the person. There was a moment in your book where you said you looked at Bryan Nichols and you realized there was a hurting young man who said he was accused, allegedly falsely, of raping his girlfriend, but you actually looked past and realized there's actually a person hurting. I mean, I can't believe that. Well, I'm hurting and I'm afraid for my life. You're actually looking at him with a moment of connection.
I mean, the man had 3 guns.
Smith had never met Nichols, but as he held her hostage, she was able to talk him into surrendering.
Everybody else. I don't want to make it personal, but at the same time, if I can save a life, do not trust Mr. Nichols. Ever again. Ever again. Don't trust him.
Nichols, later convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. 10 years after the shooting at the courthouse, a movie was created about the ordeal.
He blames drugs and alcohol for everything that had went down that day.
It was March 11th, 2005. Bryan Nichols was 33 years old at the time and headed to court, which was a normal day in court for many, but would soon end up to be a day that many would never forget.
Good morning, Mr. Nichols. I'm Judge Cox from Cobb County. I've been asked to handle this matter for Fulton County.
As a preliminary matter, we faxed it to her chambers last night. We were unable to file with the clerk's office, asking to recuse all Fulton County magistrates from conducting this hearing. And we've also asked that our understanding is the Fulton County magistrate.
Mr. Nichols, you're here today because of prior charges that have been brought against you involving.
Your Honor, good morning. Michelle McCutcheon for the state. The rape case indictment 04SC205 case assigned to Judge Stephanie Manis in Fulton County Superior Court.
All right. And at the appropriate time, that case, if it's that, and held on with no bond until that time. Anything else, Mr. Adams?
No, sir. I would. Well, one additional thing, right to remain silent and not be interrogated anymore on any of these charges, as well as from any charges around March 11th as well.
All right, thank you. Right. Mr. Nichols, I've heard before, but as your counsel noted, you have a right to remain silent, that any statement made by you can be used as evidence at hearings to call witnesses on your behalf. And with the charges faced against you, sir, you have a possible life out with intent to rape, 20 years on aggravated sodomy. All right, sir. Anything else, Mr. Adams?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Anything else for the state?
Your Honor, yes. Mr. Adams and Mr. Parker are the counsel of record for the defendant at this time.
I am.
All right, anything else?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, that will conclude the hearing.
Mr. Parker, I believe I have your card, Mr. Adams, and I have your card.
So it is about a city block away from where our live trucks were located. This parking deck, though, would be used by some employees and definitely people who had business at the courthouse, as well as tourists or people going to underground Atlanta, anybody doing business over at the Fulton County Government Center.
And Angelique, at this point, we're not able to see that police cruiser where we initially saw a flurry of activity with police and one individual who ultimately appeared to be laying out on the ground. Can you update us? Are you able to see what's happening over there? Was that person taken away in an ambulance?
In my head, and I've tried many cases in that courtroom, all of us have, how the defendant managed to get unshackled. I understand he was going to trial, so everybody, when a defendant, a violent felon, comes to the courthouse, they are shackled en route from the jail. When they get to the courthouse, if a jury is about to see them, they are unshackled. You don't want the jury to see them with handcuffs on. But how did he get from one building over to the other, up an elevator? I thought he was trying to break free to get away from trial. In fact, he came back to the courtroom to get the judge. You were in the courthouse when this happened. What do you recall?
I was on my way to Judge Barnes's courtroom this morning when I was walking through the hall and I saw a number of deputies running out the courtroom. They were running with, I was teasing them. I said, "What happened? Did somebody escape?" And when I looked down and they had their guns drawn, they were screaming, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." One of them whisked me into the elevator, and there was about 9 deputies in the elevator. A female deputy who was trying to key her mic put her head down on the wall and just started crying. And I said, "What happened?" And she said the defendant took the gun away from the deputy and shot the judge. I said, "What judge?" She told me it was Judge Barnes, and I immediately knew that it was the defendant that was on trial for this horrible sexual offense and who had already taken his girlfriend hostage. That's what he was on trial. The defendant somehow ran across to the new side of the building, got in the stairway, ran down the stairway, ran out onto Martin Luther King, and that's when he shot and killed the last deputy.
Anybody that talked to my father, whether they were a criminal who wanted legal advice or a judge who was a friend, would walk away feeling the same way.
You were that hostage.
Yes, ma'am, I was that hostage.
Tell us what happened.
Well, you know, I was that hostage, but I was also a hostage to many other things during that time in my life. I was battling a drug addiction.
The account of that night in your book, Unlikely Angel, and I have to tell you, I was riveted reading this book.
One thing that that first struck me when I was reading the opening chapters of the book, when you pulled up to your house, you saw Bryan Nichols parked in the car, and something told you. Like, you were afraid of him.
I was very afraid, but let me go a little bit further and tell you that I was very afraid, but then there was something in the back of my head that said that the drugs that I had done had permanently made me paranoid, and that this was nothing, and that I should just get out of the car and go inside, and that's what I did.
Yeah, as I was reading, Ashley, every woman's nightmare. Not only are you stalked, which for a lot of women, we always look behind our, behind our shoulder when we're walking through the parking lot or we're pulling up to, our house, but then to be having a guy grab you from behind with a gun and force you in your apartment, thinking I may be raped. I mean, what's going on in you and your mind as all this is happening?
Of course, many things began to go through my head, but I didn't stop fighting. I thought, this is it. God's all I have now, and I'm going to call on him.
One thing I really appreciate as well in your book is as you chronicle the events of that night, the 7 hours that he held you hostage. You didn't know, at first you thought he was going to kill you.
I did.
I mean, he took you into the bathroom, he made you sit in the bathtub, and you thought, okay, he's
tied up.
well, but at first he just made her sit in the bathtub. You thought, he's putting me here because it'll be less messy when he kills me.
That's exactly what
I mean, all of these things going through your mind. How did you get to that point of thinking he's going to kill you in the bathtub to reading to him from your book?
I'll tell you exactly how I got to that point. There's a little story before that where he asked me if I had any drugs, and I did, and I gave them to him, and he asked me if I was going to use them with me, and it was about 3 times that he just kept probing me. Are you going to do this? Will you do this with me? Are you going to? And for the first time in my life, I felt like Jesus Christ was standing in his person saying to me, Ashley, this is your last chance. I didn't have to worry about being in control of the situation, and neither Bryan Nichols wasn't in control either. I felt like Jesus Christ was in control. God's going to look at us, is going to judge us on sin, not what the world justifies as good sin or bad sin or not as bad sin or whatever. And I was able to look at Bryan Nichols and go, he's loved by God.
Are you sorry for what you did?
I don't even think sorry is expressive or the right word for the way that I feel about the way that I acted and the things that I did. More than sorry.
If skeptics say, is he sorry for his victims or is he sorry for himself, how does he answer?
If skeptic says, are you sorry for yourself or the victims, how would you answer?
Sometimes I sit around and I wonder, how did I end up in this place? And one of the main things is that I fell out of love with myself, and I fell out of love with.
They were making this claim under 18.2.
Accused Atlanta courthouse shooter Bryan Nichols sat stoically as prosecutors played for the first time in open court an audio recording of the rampage. 2 gunshots are heard on the tape. Relatives of the victims wept as they listened.
He went directly to the chambers area.
The tape was the most dramatic moment of the opening day of the long-delayed trial. Prosecutor Kelly Hill played the tape over defense team objections as she laid out her case against Nichols, who could face the death penalty for the March 11, 2005 spree that began inside a downtown Atlanta courthouse. Nichols is accused of killing a judge, a court reporter, a deputy sheriff, and a federal agent.
He was a conniving, vicious, cold-blooded, remorseless, evil, and extremely dangerous killer.
Nichols, who was on trial for rape at the time of the shooting, admits he was the gunman, but has pled not guilty by reason of insanity. It's a defense prosecutors were clearly trying to counter in their first argument before jurors.
At that point, he made a decision, and his plan was not to escape just then. His plan was to kill.
Lawyers for Nichols say he was so deluded during the rampage, he believed he was a slave, rebelling against authority.
It's his war. And in Bryan Nichols' war, he believed that he was a slave.
The trial, being held a few blocks from the scene of the downtown Atlanta shootings, could last months. It took 9 weeks to select a jury of 8 women and 4 men, and more than 600 witnesses could be called. Jason Bronis, The Associated Press, Atlanta. After just 2 days of jury selection, the trial is again on hold, halted, because defense attorneys say they've run out of money and can't properly defend Bryan Nichols.
I have a hard time knowing what I know about the state of readiness and the needs that are present in this case, that we're ready to pick a jury.
Nichols faces death if convicted of the shootings, which took place after he escaped from custody during a March 2005 rape trial. He's charged with killing the judge presiding over the trial, a court reporter, a deputy sheriff, and a federal agent.
Without some sense that these
Nichols has no money to pay for his own defense. Preparing for trial has already cost the public defender's office some $1.8 million. The state of Georgia cut off funding to the defense team on July 1st. Nichols' lawyers, who plan to argue he was delusional at the time of the killings, say they can't properly represent their client without more money, in part to hire expert witnesses.
I know that if this case goes forward without any additional funding, there's no chance of a verdict, if he were to get one, standing up.
Nichols' lawyers are now calling on the judge to level a contempt charge against the state agency responsible for funding the defense team. They asked the judge to halt jury selection, and he agreed. At a hearing next week, the judge will demand an explanation from state officials as to why they stopped paying the bill.
The fate of Atlanta courthouse shooter Bryan Nichols is now in the hands of a jury. The panel spent Thursday trying to determine if Nichols was insane when he went on a shooting rampage 3 years ago, killing 4 people, including a judge. In 2005, Nichols, who was on trial for rape at the time, was being escorted to a courtroom when he beat up a deputy guarding him, stole her gun, and started his shooting spree. He evaded police for almost a full day before a woman he took hostage alerted police to his whereabouts. During his 6-week murder trial, the defense has argued Nichols suffers from mental health issues and that on the day of the shooting, he believed he was a slave rebelling against authority. Prosecutors have painted him as a cold-blooded killer, vicious and dangerous. They say he made up his slave master story in order to avoid the death penalty. If a jury returns a guilty verdict in the murder case, it must then decide if he deserves the death sentence. If Nichols is found not guilty by reason of insanity, he'll likely go to a state mental hospital.
I will give the maximum sentence, which is 20 years. I hereby sentence Mr. Nichols to 20 years to serve, consecutive to counts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 32. Count 35 is another armed robbery count, and you know by now the armed robbery carries a life imprisonment, and I'm going to give him the maximum of a life imprisonment. That is consecutive to counts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 32, and 33. None of this will be served on probation. I'm not planning on giving Mr. Nichols any probation at all. Neither am I planning on giving him a fine. If anybody stands up, I am ordering the marshals to put you down immediately.
On the verge of hearing the verdict that would spare the life of a courthouse killer, the judge told a courtroom packed with victims' loved ones that any disruption would be met with jail time.
20 days, contempt of court, and you'll have to get the Court of Appeals to set your bond. And good luck on that in the Nichols trial, when everybody is sitting on pins and needles.
Bryan Nichols was convicted in the March 2005 killings of a judge, a court reporter, a sheriff's deputy, and a federal agent in violence that began at the Fulton County Courthouse in downtown Atlanta. Amid tight security, in a courtroom just blocks away from the crime scene, Nichols faced lethal injection.
Asked to count 28, please.
But after deliberating for 4 full days, a jury of 12 could not agree on the death sentence. They're split 9-3 in favor of execution.
In Georgia, it takes all 12 individuals at a unanimous decision in order to give the death penalty.
Jurors saw more than 1,000 pieces of evidence in a trial that lasted some 3 months and cost Georgia taxpayers millions. Anything short of a death penalty was viewed as a failure by prosecutors, who turned down an offer by Nichols to plead guilty to the murder charges if the state took death off the table. The task of sentencing Nichols now falls on Judge James Botifer. 11 life sentences, 4 without parole, and another 385 years for Atlanta's courthouse killer. It was a crime that shocked the city and devastated the legal community. Bryan Nichols gunned down 4, including a judge, in a 2005 spree that began at a downtown courthouse. The 37-year-old was barely audible as he spoke publicly in court for the first time.
I'm not bringing dishonor. This decision to spare my life.
Prosecutors wanted the death penalty, but 12 jurors couldn't agree on execution. There were 3 holdouts. Judge James Botifer, who imposed the toughest sentence allowed by law, ended Saturday's hearing with a grave warning.
Do not ever trust him again, because there's been ample evidence that trusting Mr. Nichols will get you killed.
In an emotionally charged news conference, even the lead prosecutor broke down.
We fought for justice for 4 wonderful people, 4 innocent people.
Many family members of the victims were not satisfied with the sentence, like the daughter of a slain court reporter.
My family and I watched in horror and disgust while Nichols' entire defense team stomped all over the justice system.
The wife of a deputy sheriff.
He never once showed to me any remorse, constantly sitting in his chair at the defense table with a smirk on his face.
And the wife of a federal agent, Nichols' final victim.
Bryan Nichols' parents raised an extremely evil person.
Anything short of a death penalty was viewed as a failure by prosecutors, who turned down an offer by Nichols to plead guilty if the state took death off the table. Now the U.S. attorney will weigh a federal charge against Nichols for murdering the agent. A conviction on that charge, and Nichols could again face death.
Do you think smoking marijuana chronically distributed to your downfall?
Yeah, I definitely think that it played a factor in my development, in my brain chemistry. Yeah, see marijuana being legalized all over the place, and just like alcohol, too much of anything.
The Fulton County courthouse killer is opening up to us, Channel 2 Action News, 11 years after that deadly rampage.
Bryan Nichols says he has stayed quiet because he didn't want to cause more damage than he already has. It was March 2005 when Nichols escaped from the Fulton County courthouse. That touched off chaos in the streets and a massive manhunt. Nichols killed 4 people, including a judge. He's now breaking his silence in an exclusive interview with Channel 2's...
To look into the mindset of one of the most notorious active shooters in America, the most notorious in Georgia's history.
I don't want to cause any more damage than what I have already done, and that's the main reason why I've always remained quiet.
The calls came from the courthouse shooter, Bryan Nichols.
I did some very bad things.
His victims in March 2005, Judge Roland Barnes, court reporter Julie Brandow, Deputy Hoyt Teasley, federal agent David Wilhelm.
Doing an interview with you, there will be nothing that I want from that, really, other than to express my remorse for the things that I've done.
You sought redemption. Have you asked God for forgiveness?
Have you asked God for forgiveness?
I have. I pray and I ask. I think that drugs and alcohol played a part in those delusions. If there is something that someone could take away from this talk, it will be to recognize and understand the harm that marijuana can do.
Was justice done to Bryan Nichols?
You know, it doesn't matter. Things are as they are. If I could go back and do things differently, of course I would. I can't play the hand that I wish I was dealt. You know, I have to play the hand that I have.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, that was the Bryan Nichols story, you know what I'm saying? And, yeah, man, you know what I'm saying? Dude, man, he went out like a straight savage, let me tell you. You know what I'm saying? There ain't too many people that will do that type of time right there. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody just gonna overpower, you know what I'm saying, the deputy, go in and kill the judge and, you know what I'm saying, all that there, you feel me? So, you know what I'm saying? That's why Bryan Nichols is an Atlanta legend. So, yeah, man, if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button and also press the bell right next to it. And I appreciate you for rocking with me. 100.